Polygamy, mental health struggles, and cult-like control are all elements that played into an unimaginably heinous crime: the brutal murder of a defenseless baby girl. The story of 20-year-old Chloe Driver and the horrific murder of her 13-month-old daughter Hannah shocked and disgusted the nation.
Little baby Hannah was just 13 months old when her mother Chloe took her life, stabbing the baby to death in their home in Canton, Georgia.
While Chloe took the fall for the heinous crime, many have questioned if her cult master husband deserved to also face justice for his role in the case. Let's keep watching to unravel this controversial and very unusual case. On December 9, 2020, cops and first responders in Canton, Georgia, responded to a crime scene at 2:30 in the afternoon. It was a call that they would never forget. They arrived at an area called Mountain View, a local subdivision. It was there that they would discover what initially appeared to be an attempt at murder-suicide. They found a young woman named Chloe Driver, who appeared to be suffering from self-inflicted stab wounds. Shockingly, she was still alive. Her infant daughter Hannah was also covered in blood and severe stab wounds. But tragically, Chloe's wounds were fatal, and she had already passed away by the time first responders arrived at the scene. Chloe was rushed to the hospital for treatment and would end up surviving her attempt to take her own life. While at the hospital, she admitted multiple times to law enforcement that it was she who had taken her infant daughter's life. She was arrested and charged with malice and felony murder, aggravated assault, and cruelty to children. Once she was well enough to leave the hospital, she was immediately taken to jail.
We learned to find out it looked like it'd be an attempted murder.
Hannah died, and Chloe was arrested after her release and charged with malice, felony murder, aggravated assault, and cruelty to children in the first degree. Police reports allege Driver admitted to stabbing her daughter multiple times.
What could have possibly driven this young mother to commit such a despicable act? Was it some kind of mental health issue, or was it pure evil? As investigators began to take a deeper look at Chloe's background, relationships, and living situation, they would quickly realize that this case was unlike anything they had seen before. Chloe's motivation for wanting to kill her own daughter was complex, and there was much more going on in this case than it initially seemed. Chloe's life was much different than the life of a normal 20-year-old girl. This was because Chloe was a polygamist. At the time, she was married to an older man named Ben Michael, who would often go by Brian Joyce or Z. Ben was a self-proclaimed spiritual leader who believed he had special gifts.
You will hear that he had 3 wives at this time. He had Jessica, he had Chloe, he had Sarah. It was a constant indoctrination of an alternative ideology belief system to an already vulnerable young lady. A 17, 18, and 19-year-old woman with a 38, 39, 40-year-old man.
In addition to Chloe, Ben had at least 2 other known wives. Chloe, Ben, and these other wives were all in a very strange polygamous relationship that was described as cult-like. Ben was the leader of the group, and the women would typically follow his lead and do anything he asked of them. According to those who had seen what the dynamic was like within the group, Ben would intentionally try to make the women jealous of one another. The polygamous dynamic of this relationship was supposedly specifically hard on Chloe because she had been with Ben the longest. When she first became involved with him, there were no other women she had to compete with. As often happens in these types of plural relationships, drama and conflict were pretty much unavoidable. Despite being married to multiple women, Ben's feelings were not the same for each woman. He definitely had his favorites among his wives, and it didn't take Chloe long to figure out that she was not one of them. Over time, she began to become resentful of both Ben and his other wives because she felt like she wasn't being given the same level of attention. Chloe's complex living situation caused her to feel frustrated, angry, and unloved. It also contributed to a pretty volatile living situation in the home that she shared with her husband and the other sister wives. Along with practicing polygamy, Chloe, Ben, and the other wives also believed in living a nomadic lifestyle. This involved moving from place to place and rarely staying in one home for very long. This was partially because they were trying to protect their lifestyle from being detected by other people, particularly law enforcement.
You know, polygamy illegal in the United States. Other cultures, it's fine, it's welcomed in other parts of the world. Everyone has an opinion about it. And by itself, if you have a situation with all consenting adults and they don't get legally married, it does exist.
Polygamy is illegal in all 50 of the United States. In fact, it's even considered a crime that can be punished by fines, jail time, or both. Whether Chloe was actually happy with moving from place to place all the time or having to share her husband's affection with other women likely wouldn't have mattered, because the dynamic within her relationship was cult-like. Chloe didn't get a say in family decisions. Ben, being much older than her, used the fact that she was vulnerable and impressionable to his advantage. He was able to manipulate and control her and essentially acted like her master because Chloe already suffered from her own mental health issues. She went along with Ben's orders. While any rational person could see that this was a very toxic situation, Chloe never tried to leave. The nomadic lifestyle that the group was living caused Chloe to become isolated from everyone else besides those who were in the cult. She would rarely have any kind of communication with her family and friends back home. It's believed that this was one of the many factors that contributed to Chloe's sanity quickly unraveling. Over time, the imbalance of power within Chloe's relationship with her husband only grew more and more obvious. It began to take a toll on her already struggling mental health. She began to try to think of ways that she could win back her husband's attention. This is where Chloe's mental instability began to cloud her thinking. Instead of blaming her sister wives for the fact that her marriage with Ben was not where she wanted it to be, she began to blame her daughter. Chloe began to believe that baby Hannah was an obstacle that was keeping her from winning over Ben's love. She began to become resentful of her own daughter. Prosecutors believe that it was around this time that Chloe began plotting ways to remove Hannah from their lives altogether. On the day of the murder, Chloe and Hannah had been staying at a home that belonged to a man connected to their group. That afternoon, neighbors reported hearing blood-curdling screams coming from inside the home. This caused the neighbors to call 911. It would only be a short time later that first responders would arrive to discover the tragic scene that had unfolded within the home. According to the prosecution, Chloe was fueled with rage, resentment, and jealousy when she brutally killed her own daughter that day.
But the defense paints a different picture, a mental breakdown by Chloe, who was, they say, legally insane at the time, suffering from delusional thinking.
But when Chloe would eventually face trial for murder in late 2024, her defense team painted a very different picture of who Chloe was and what she was going through at the time of the murder. They claimed that Chloe was suffering from intense mental health issues as a result of her involvement with her cult leader husband and their dysfunctional group. In fact, they said that her mental health issues had become so severe that she was legally insane at the time that she decided to kill Hannah and then attempt to take her own life. Their goal was to try to prove that Chloe was not guilty of her daughter's murder by reason of insanity. This was going to be a very difficult task to pull off. This is partially because this case takes place in the state of Georgia, where it's especially difficult to prove that someone is legally insane. So Chloe's defense team would have to try to prove to the jury beyond reasonable doubt that she had no control over herself or her actions when she killed her daughter. The defense team knew that they had their work cut out for them. Not only would they have to prove Chloe's insanity, but they would also have to deal with the emotional factor that the victim was a 13-month-old defenseless baby girl. Most juries don't have sympathy for mothers who kill their own children, especially babies. This would make this case all the more difficult for the defense. As Chloe sat in the courtroom throughout the trial, she didn't necessarily fit most people's stereotypical idea of mentally insane. She didn't make any sudden outbursts or strange statements. Instead, her behavior seemed mostly calm. During opening statements, Chloe remained mostly stoic and unemotional as the prosecutor ripped into her. Even while showing the jury an adorable photo of baby Hannah from before her murder and describing the way the baby was killed, Chloe barely batted an eye.
This is Hannah Nicole Driver. On December 8th of 2020, she was 13 months old. This is not the way that you will see her in this trial. Instead, you will see her the way that first responding officers saw her, the way that the EMTs saw her, the way that the ER doctor saw her, and eventually the way that the medical examiner saw her. You will see this 13-month-old beautiful baby girl who had been brutally murdered by her mother, stabbed repeatedly until every bit of life drained out of her.
A particularly interesting part of the trial was when Jason Spillers, Chloe's friend, came forward to testify about what her cult-style relationship was really like. He explained that Ben would sometimes use strange and far-fetched religious beliefs to control his wives, but that overall they seemed to live in harmony. From an outsider's perspective, Ben's role within the group seemed to be someone who provided financial support, love, and affection to the women. Jason explained that on the day Hannah was killed, he heard strange noises coming from the room where Chloe had been with the baby. He ran into the room and found a gory murder scene. Blood, Chloe lying on the ground with deep lacerations on her neck. Baby Hannah lay on the ground beside her, appearing to be dead. When Jason realized what Chloe was trying to do, he jumped into action, trying to save her life. While he tried to stop her bleeding, Chloe fought against him, telling him that she wanted to die.
And I just wanted to try to save her life. So I held her down and kept pressure on the wounds for probably about 2 minutes because the paramedics came really fast.
Okay. So she told you to stop. She tried to push you away.
Yeah.
She said, I'm supposed to die, and that she wanted to see Nimsy one last time.
Yes.
Is that what you recall?
Yes.
Okay.
In a rare moment of emotion from Chloe, she bowed her head and cried as Jason emotionally testified about the kind of mother he saw her be to Hannah before everything happened. She appeared to be a loving and devoted mother who would do anything to protect her little girl. His testimony was very good for the defense because it backed up everything they had claimed so far about Chloe not being in her typical state of mind when she committed the murder.
Everything that you ever saw her do with that child was what you would expect for a loving mother, right? You know that because of what you saw in that child's eyes and face when that child saw her mother, right?
Yes.
You described her earlier in your testimony that the child was bright and full of life, right?
Yes.
And she got that personality, she got that as a reflection from the treatment she got from her mother.
From the love of her parents.
Yeah, Z2, right?
Z2.
But from her mother.
Yeah.
You said that her mother was particularly the one responsible for most of the day-to-day motherly things with the child, changing the diapers, right?
Yeah, I mean, Z changed some diapers too, obviously, but yeah, she was.
Another incredibly dramatic courtroom moment took place as Ben came forward to testify. He spoke about his daughter Hannah and ripped into Chloe for taking her life. With his strange way of talking and cold demeanor, it was not hard to imagine this man manipulating and controlling young women. Ben took no responsibility for the mental toll that his behavior and the toxic cult dynamic had on Chloe. In fact, he didn't seem to think he had done anything wrong at all. When asked what he would like to see happen to Chloe, he claimed that there was no punishment that she could face that would take back what she had done and the harm she had caused. He even suggested that death might be a fitting punishment for the kind of person who would take the life of a baby. His words seemed to affect Chloe the most out of everyone who testified throughout her trial.
I don't know that no sentence, maximum sentence, could ever get through to her in a way that she won't build a new identity, a new mask, change who she is, manipulate the next party. Chloe Alexis Driver wasn't a victim. She had the most power in our group. It was called her fits. I don't know what kind of a sentence would help her. I mean, the inclination to say death penalty, maximum. She believed she could take the life of a baby out of this world, a baby, any baby, and this beautiful baby who had this much potential to help the world, an impact that can't be weighed.
Ultimately, though, it wasn't up to Ben to decide what kind of fate Chloe deserved for killing baby Hannah. It would be up to a jury to decide whether or not she was guilty of murder or too insane to be held responsible for Hannah's death. But before the case was put into the hands of the jury, each side had one last time to plead their case during closing arguments. Chloe's defense team discussed how she had been brainwashed by Ben and his cult ideologies, and even led to believe that she was passing her own sins down to her daughter. But the prosecution urged the jury not to fall for the insanity act, claiming that Chloe knew exactly what she was doing when she murdered Hannah. It was very clear that she understood that she was killing Hannah, and she understood the permanency of that decision. She always knew the consequences of that act. Delusional compulsion does not comply in this case. Which side would the jury believe? Thousands of people who had been following the case from around the country waited in anticipation to find out. When it was revealed to the courtroom that the jury had come to a unanimous decision, Chloe showed no signs of fear or any other emotion as she sat awaiting the verdict to be read.
If you will read the jury's verdict, please.
For each count below, we, the jury, find the defendant, count 1, malice murder, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but mentally ill. Count 2, felony murder, aggravated assault, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but mentally ill. Count 3, felony murder, cruelty to children in the first degree, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but mentally ill. Count 4, aggravated assault, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but mentally ill. Count 5, cruelty to children in the first degree, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but mentally ill.
The jury would end up finding Chloe guilty beyond a reasonable doubt on all counts against her, including malice murder and cruelty to children. The horrific case finally came to an end in December of 2024 when Chloe finally faced her sentencing. She appeared in the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit instead of the blazers and slacks she had been seen wearing for weeks during her trial. She also seemed more emotional than she had ever appeared throughout her trial, crying as she read a statement ahead of the judge handing down her sentence. During this statement, she took responsibility for her actions and apologized for the pain and destruction she had caused.
I appreciate the opportunity to be heard during this whole process. I am terribly sorry for many things in my life, but most of all for who was lost, and I always will be. Every single day I live with my guilt. I have drowned in sorrow and regret with such an acute awareness of it for so long, I never imagined there would be anything more than that for me. Quite frankly, I didn't believe I deserved anything more than just that. In the past, I genuinely believed I had to die every day for my daughter, to hate myself for my failure in protecting her. But I know now that life goes on whether I suffer or not, so I need to stop taking from it. I know now that I must live for my daughter instead and do the best I can to be kind and loving and giving, because that's exactly what being with Hannah taught me.
Chloe told the judge that she would accept the punishment she saw fit for her, no matter what it was, with peace. As the judge prepared to give Chloe her sentence, she acknowledged that the crime she had committed was unspeakably evil and horrific. However, she had to also acknowledge that the defense was able to prove to the jury that she was mentally ill at the time. Because of this, she showed mercy to Chloe, which many people didn't believe that she deserved.
You did a horrible thing. But based on the evidence at trial and based on particularly the mental health testimony, the court will impose the following sentence as to count 1, malice murder, life in prison with the possibility of parole. Count 2 and count 3 are vacated as a matter of law, in that you cannot be sentenced to more than one murder count when there is only one victim.
Ultimately, Chloe was sentenced to life in prison, but she will have the chance of becoming a free person again one day. Whether or not she's able to get mental health help will likely play a major role in whether she's able to convince a parole board to give her a second chance one day. As for Ben, he is still a free man who is not facing any kind of charges in connection to Hannah's murder or the cult lifestyle that many believe contributed to this horrific tragedy. It is true that Ben Michael was not the person who wielded the knife that would ultimately take Hannah's life. However, it seems undeniable that his cult beliefs, control, and manipulation definitely played a role in Chloe Driver's mental unraveling. Will he ever face justice for his role in the case? Only time will tell. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Until next time, stay safe.